September 3, 2024. This is the Commissioner Status Update meeting. The time is 10 a.m. and I want to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Public comment? Hearing none. Let's move into business. First item is the Justice Center update. This is a discussion item, and we have Jeff Voller here.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Voller. David Mendez is not available to be here this morning. He has a conflicting meeting, so I am going to go ahead and give you the Justice Center update. I submitted a budget that David had put together. That's just the budget that he provides for you with current updates. So if you have any questions, I can attempt to answer those for you on that. The progress update, last week we mentioned that there was a detail in the header flashing that All West Testing, when they came on site to do their inspections, didn't like that detail. While it is a very standard detail that they use in most construction projects, they didn't like the slope that the angle of the flashing had. And they are aware of a lawsuit that is going on another building somewhere in the county. I'm not exactly sure which project, relating to something very similar in terms of that flashing design. So they called that out. The building team, the design team, and our representatives got together to look at some different options for that and did decide that we should probably redo, they had installed the flashing on the north side of the building. And in order to make that right and improve that situation, we are going to have the flashing re-bent to where it's got a bigger slope on it, will slope water away. So this is the flashing that goes on top of the window details. And that was an $11,000 change order that David was able to approve on that, and that's going to come out of the general contractor contingency, the construction contingency for that portion of the project. So we feel like we have a better design moving forward with that, and so we feel like that is resolved and will be a better scenario for us in the scope of that project. Main project is moving along really, really well. The third floor is nearly done with framing. A lot of the rough ends are done. We're ready for what we call a box walk, which is basically looking at where electrical outlets are placed. We'll probably be doing that early next week. We'll be including the prosecutor's office, staff, and IT, so they can come look at those box locations and make sure they like the layouts and things as we, start to look at it in real life. And sometimes you wonder, why did I put that electrical outlet there on the plans? But it makes more sense to move it over to a different location based on function when you're standing in a room. So making great progress there. The main HVAC ducts are installed, and they're going to be doing what they call a pressure test. This is one of the quality controls that we do with that project. That's scheduled for Thursday. David Mendez and I will be on site to observe that, just to check the static pressure of the ducts, make sure there's no leaks, and that those have been installed per specs. And then as a reminder, the canopy in a temporary tunnel is going to be installed on the north side of the existing Justice building over the weekend, so that they continue the work to make the tie-in from the old building to the new building. And that will be weekend work, so it'll have very little impact, and that temporary tunnel will be there so they can continue to have construction while we function as we normally do on a daily basis. So with that, do you have any questions about the Justice Center?
Commissioner Brooks? No? No? Thank you. All right, next item.
Okay, I'll keep rolling along. Next item is facility project updates with HVAC.
Yep.
And there are several projects, HVAC related, that have been discussed or currently approved. And I'm ready to move forward with next steps to keep those rolling. Those projects include the jail HVAC system. That would be replacing an old closed loop water system to new rooftop units. Currently, $570,340 has been allocated from the jail 5-year plan. The Juvenile Justice Center has an old chiller that is on the roof that is failing, and $400,000 from the general 5-year plan has been allocated for that. And then the Justice building has been discussed, but there has not been funding allocated for that. We estimate that to be about a $400,000 project as well. If you think of the big green mechanical HVAC unit that is sitting on the ground in between the court hold building and the Justice Center has been failing over the summer. It's almost every day we have to go restart that, sometimes several times a day, especially if it's under high demand with high temperatures. And we would actually suggest that that's probably the highest priority. Apollo, who is the mechanical contractor, has actually said that's probably the highest priority that the county has, is to replace that unit. And then additionally in that Justice Center, there's a air handler and another rooftop unit that should be considered for replacement. So one of the things I would suggest is that maybe we reallocate the $400,000 from the Juvenile Justice Center to the current Justice Center building, and make that a higher priority. In order to keep all of these moving forward, what we need to do is submit an RFQ and put that out. And I wrote the RFQ to include all of these, to say that the county will phase these based off of allowable budgets. I met with Pat Braden to talk about that strategy, and he agreed that that would be a good way to do that. So even though we haven't allocated the full funds for all of these, each of those would be a standalone project. And so basically for the 24-25 year, we would select a mechanical contractor that we would bring on board to do the design work for these different projects, help us build the budgets out, and then figure out priorities and what we can do as we allocate for those moving forward. With the Justice Center building, again, I think part of the reason we would suggest that to be a really high priority is, one is going out all the time, needs to be reset, and it does have more impact to more people that are in that building. The Juvenile Justice Center building, while it should, definitely be considered for replacement, does not have as many people in that building, and it is currently functioning. So those would be the recommendations there. So I have drafted that request for qualifications. It is with legal for review right now, and pending that approval from legal, we would plan to submit that at the end of next week. Walkthroughs would be scheduled so that interested contractors could come take a look at all the existing sites, with a projected bid opening currently scheduled for around October 22nd. And then we'd bring you the formal proposals once those bids are open. So any questions about those projects or the portions there?
Commissioner Brooks?
No.
No. Now, it sounds like we need to get some pricing and then start prioritizing.
Yes, for sure.
So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The next is Coroner's Office Autopsy Lab, next steps.
Yeah. So again, next steps with that, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the autopsy lab, and while not currently funded as a budget line item, conversations about that is a high priority and something that the county wants to make sure we do. In order to keep that one moving forward, similar, we should release an RFQ to select an architect for that one. And so with the selection of an architect, we would then need to allocate some funds for the actual design of that. That probably would be a valuable move to get that architect on board, start getting those plans designed. So, when we do decide to fund that project, that, we have the plans ready to go, and then we can set it out and select a general contractor to go with that. So I understand that through some of that discussion about funding, there has been discussion about using some interest revenue income for that. If we do allocate that for the some portions of that for design fees, we currently estimate that to be probably between around $100,000 to $130,000 of architect fees.
How much?
$100,000 to $130,000 in architect fees to design that lab. And so I'm bringing that for you today to see if you want to go ahead and release that RFQ and consider concepts for getting a architect on board.
Do you have a number of architects that you plan on approaching for this, or do you have one in mind, or what?
Yeah, I think in all fairness, we would send this out and let architects know that, this has been released, and let multiple bid on it. I believe there's some that have a little more experience doing this type of thing. In fact, Lombard and Bernard, the architect that we're using right now for the Justice Center in partnership with Corey Trapp, did the Coroners lab down in Boise. So we know they have some experience with it. But I have relationships with quite a few different architects in this area as well, and I feel like it'd be prudent to let all of them know that this is out for bid, and if they're interested, they can take a look at it.
I don't have a problem with at least getting the quote for what the fees would be. We're talking about just phase one?
Correct.
Nothing more at this point?
Correct, phase one.
Yeah.
I have a problem with spending any money on it at all.
Yeah, I understand.
I thought the coroner's lab was dead as disco, but I guess not.
Well, what I'd said all along was that I wasn't against it. It was just the fact that if it was in the budget, it would automatically exclude us from any prospective grant funding.
It's a matter of timing.
Well, I understand, the Spokane has kind of, relaxed some of its limitations. But at least according to the prosecuting attorney's office, he seems to feel that we need to have one. It's not imminent, but he certainly seems to feel that way. And so I'm not averse to it in that sense. As far as increasing the overhead and adding staff and things like that, that is a separate discussion. Having the facility there, looking at a third party that could come in and do autopsies. Do they have to do all of the autopsies? I'm not necessarily sure that that is the case and that that's a requirement, but certainly to help in situations where perhaps Spokane can't. But this is a discussion item anyhow, so. Anything else with that?
Well, with guidance on whether you want to release, you want me to draft an RFQ and proceed with that. So.
I mean, it might be better if you ask when all three of us are here.
Sure.
So you can put it back on for next week.
Will do.
Next item is number 3, impact fee, public hearing discussion. We did get a new methodology determined to calculate our impact fee. It has gone up significantly from the original impact fee estimate or calculation. And we do need to have a public hearing on that. However, we are waiting on the Impact Fee Advisory Board, which that meeting is on Thursday. So assuming that the board is okay and to proceed with a public hearing and the advisory board says yes to what the new fee would be, then it would seem appropriate to get the ball rolling quickly with getting a public hearing set up on that. So that would be
Agreed.
a direction item.
Okay. And I have the direction I need, so.
Yep, and we'll know Thursday afternoon.
Okay, and can I get a copy of that new study too? I haven't gotten that yet.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll make sure you
I
have
see
that.
Sarah back there. Okay,
Yeah, we'll get it over to you.
great, thank you.
So, okay. Item number 4, treasurer staff access to information controlled by the assessor. I have Steve Matheson. Steve, are you on the phone?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Do you want me to kick it off?
Yes, please.
I'm not sure if Bela's in the room right now, but I wanted to start the conversation off with just simply a request of the assessor's office. If he can explain why he has not allowed us access to data sets that we need to do our job.
Assessor Kovacs is in the room. Did you want to respond to that? He's coming up to the table.
Okay, great, thanks.
Commissioners and Steve, this is Bela Kovacs, Kootenai County Assessor for the record. The history, I believe, of this pertains to the conversion to on-base. And to my knowledge and my understanding, my prior chief deputy was working on that sometime, I want to say, around September or October of 2023. The decision was made at that time to not give carte blanche access to our data in the paperclip system. Historically, that's what was done. The treasurer had access to that information. After that decision was made, it was reported to me, and it made sense to me. This seems to be consistent with, I believe, with what Jamila Holmes said at the April 1st meeting. That was a different meeting. It was a meeting on the topic of solid waste assessments on tax notices. But the statements that were made by Jamila Holmes and by you, Commissioner Matari, at that time was that it makes no sense to give another agency carte blanche, unfettered access to a database. My understanding of the tax deed process is not robust. I know it's not part of what the assessor office does. I have looked at the statutes, and I did not become involved in that discussion until the 6th of October of 2023, when I sent an email to the treasurer's office asking what components of information it is that they needed. My purpose for asking that question was to provide that information that they needed to do their jobs, as opposed to unfettered access to the system. I believe last year was a very tumultuous time with everyone trying to get their arms around House Bill 292. It was a very busy time for the treasurer's office, and at that point in time, they were not positioned to address the issue, and it was put off. I do have an email towards the end of October from Jill Smith, in which she indicated that she simply pointed to forms that she wanted access to, that they had historical access to, but she was not able to provide me with the details that I had asked for in terms of what the components of information are that they needed.
Can I interject?
If I may finish.
No, I
to
want
my
to
understanding-
interject.
Just 1 second. We'll let the assessor finish.
To my understanding, the treasurer needs to compile lists of property so that they can pursue delinquencies. And so when I asked that question, the response I got was, if we can't give them the access, then we were going to be asked to do research. Now, I don't know what research she's talking about. I have no understanding. I don't believe we have a role in conducting any research, but my intent from the very beginning was to give them access. But I just feel that I need to know what that level of access is, and I would like to design the new system, the on-base system, to provide what's needed. And so that suffices. Now, from that point on, we had other issues that we encountered with the rolls that extended into the first quarter and the first half of the year. And then when May and June rolled around, we were very busy working on the rolls, and that brings us to the post-BOE timeframe where we are now. My understanding is the reason this issue is coming back up is because the treasurer's office probably is now in the position where they need to actually issue those letters of distraint. And so again, my point is, I have no problem providing them the access. I just need to know what is needed.
So a couple of things here. When you say unfettered access, are you referring to read write, or are you referring to read, or what are you referring to when it comes to unfettered? Because to me, unfettered means I can go into your database, I can change your database, I can manipulate it, I can do all kinds of stuff. Where like read access just means I can access the data I need to do my job. So what do you mean by unfettered access?
Well, I don't know what they need access to.
No, but
I'm
you're the
looking
one who used that phrase, so I'm trying to understand what you meant by that.
to look at anything and everything.
To look at it, not to write, but to look.
I don't know if they had. I don't
All right.
believe they had write access, but I don't believe they did.
And when the deputy treasurer,
I mean,
and when the deputy treasurer says I need to look at these pages, and you say I need to know the components of the information, isn't that kind of the same thing? What are you asking for? Fields or pages?
see, there's forms. So, and I'm going off of memory. I think there's an AS 44. There's an AS 43. There's an AS 16 and AS 8.
So these are the forms, right?
These are the various forms and
With the data
and they
on
have
them.
lots of data fields in them.
Okay.
And I believe some of them are even records from ITD, which are documents from ITD. And so, and I'm just trying to be very observant of what can and cannot be disclosed, because my understanding is under Title 49, Chapter 2, some information under DMV cannot be disclosed, and that's the information that is, the owner of that information is ITD, a different agency. We are the local agent of ITD. And so I think it makes sense to just try to find out what components of information are needed so that I can manage that and provide that information.
Deputy Treasurer?
I just wanted to point out that I have an email dated October 5th in which we list why we need the different documents as requested by Mr. Kovacs. I repeatedly, when he would email and say, I need to know what you need access to, would say, it's all listed down below. I told him I couldn't give him a line by line as to what we used because I didn't have access to the documents to be able to look at them and go line by line. We've now been waiting, and at that point, the people in his office did do the research we needed so that we could follow through with our warrants of distraint. We have access to ITD, Bela. We're allowed access to ITD because it's necessary for us to do our jobs. There's sometimes that we want to confirm what we find in ITD because it's not always accurate. We're now at a point where we've shifted from warrants of distraint. Kelly's working on the pending issue of tax deed. There are documents that previously we had access to that we use to research so that we're certain we've done everything within our power to make sure we've notified the right person before we sell their property. We don't have access to that anymore. We've been asking since July. Still have no answer. Kelly sent over an email probably 3 weeks ago saying, okay, I'm hitting crunch time and I don't have access, so I'm assuming you're going to do what you did with warrants of distraint and you're going to do the research. We did add the disclaimer that if you're doing the research and you miss something that we would have caught, that's on you. That's not on us because we can only do what we're able to do with the resources we're given.
So here are the things that stand out to me. First of all, Assessor Kovacs, has there been documented abuse with the Treasurer's Office having access to this information? Has something happened that has led you an event that says someone is accessing this information irresponsibly, handling it irresponsibly, and therefore I need to cut the Treasurer's Office off? Has there been any documented cases of that?
I don't believe the statutes are written that
It's a yes or no.
I can't answer your question as a yes or no because
Okay. So my point is that by cutting off access,
statutes do not position me to simply saying, yeah,
I wasn't asking you that. I was asking you if anything has happened. Okay? I wasn't asking you what the statute said. Now, the next part of this is that what this looks like is that this is an attempt to make life difficult for another office without any history of abuse, that you're cutting them off, that we're now getting more people involved with something that they've had access to apparently for years, right?
I understand that's how you're spinning it, but that's
I'm not spinning anything. I'm saying this is how it gives an appearance, okay? The reality is that if you have these concerns, I would argue don't cut the access off, develop good policy, work with the Treasurer's Office to figure out exactly what they need, and develop a platform that gives them that moving forward as opposed to cutting it off and disabling their ability to do their job.
So the email that Jill Smith is referring to was an email that I initiated on, I believe, the 5th or the 6th of October. When I didn't get a response, I followed up. When I didn't get a response to my follow-up, I walked down to the office and talked to her. At that time, she told me she was busy. I then followed up with her again. I believe I followed up, and I believe I've demonstrated an effort to work with her to try and identify the information. So again, if you're saying what you're saying, it is a spin, and that's the facts and the history do not.
Because you cut off access to information
That decision had already
first,
been made.
and then
I
you
did
ask
not-
for a reason to regain the access. That is what makes it look like you're actually creating. It gives the appearance of that. So I would ask respectfully that you at least let them get through this year, and then develop some policy. You get if we have to have another board meeting where this we can identify the specific fields, because that's what it looks like you want, specific fields of information.
Right.
We'll give you those specific fields. We'll do it in a boardroom setting, and we'll figure out, what makes sense and what doesn't. But disabling access like this and preventing them from doing their job when there's a timeline, a
But
crunch.
that's not happened, because in that same email, Jill Smith admitted that they got the information they needed, and that was an email dated October 18th. She indicated that she got all the information she needed on October 18th. And so they've not been held back. The information has been given to them. She's referring to, I believe, as research. I'm not exactly sure what she means by research, if it is simply getting information. But I would also offer that our information may be no more accurate than ITD's information.
Well, see, here's the problem, is that we're dealing with data which is specific, and I get your abstract. I don't know what research means. Research means I need to investigate. I need to figure out if I've got it right. I mean, it's just, this is like craziness here.
Nowhere in statute does it say that the assessor does any research. In statute, all we do is we value the property. That's the
Allow
only
us
aspect.
access to the information we need so that we can do the research.
It doesn't even
And you
say that in it.
So
you
what do
are
we have to do
holding us up, Bela.
what do we have to do to give the treasurer access? Does the board need to just make a decision that says, we tell our IT department to give them access? What do we have to do to give them the access they need?
Well, I've asked Jill and the treasurer's office to identify.
I'm asking you, what do we need to do to give them
Let's
access?
identify the components of information that we need so we can work together.
Here's the email.
That's what I've been asking.
From October 5th.
Can,
This was just for warrants of distraint. We hadn't hit the PTD process yet.
Yeah, I have that
That's the email listing what information we need.
Can I
You
look
had
at-
in your
can I look at
hands
that?
October 5th.
I'd like to take a look
But
at
it
that.
doesn't list the information, it simply references the forms. And it
Wrote down
references
what she
why
needs
they
for
need the
each
forms.
document.
Yeah, but the information is on the form, so they need to look at the forms to access the information. Are you suggesting that for these 10 or so forms, you want a list of every field that's in these forms that you're going to decide whether or not you're going to give them access to?
There are some forms in our system where our staff makes notes about, that may not necessarily be public record, or may not necessarily be something we want in public information. It might be notes that the appraiser makes about a property and so forth.
Okay, but might and may and all those things, okay, why don't you give us a list of what it is you don't want anyone to see? Because that sounds like a much smaller list than taking these 10 forms here and then having someone identify every field that they need access to.
Commissioner Mortari, it's as simple as this. Read the statute, find out what they need to do, identify for us what components of information they need based on statute, and give us that list. That's all I'm asking for.
Commissioner Matari, we've been dealing with this since October. Kelly is now behind in the PTD process because she hasn't been given the information requested. Ben initially made the decision with Carrie back in October. I spoke to Ben. Ben said, I had no idea. We're going to give you the access back. And then he talked to you and he said, I'm sorry. Bela says no. Jamila, when she was talking about unfettered access on April 1st, at that point, we still believed that we would have to go into your side, the assessment side of the system, to be able to collect solid waste. She was talking about not having my staff work with your modifiers, which is completely different than us looking at information. This is not a public records request. These are records that we need to do our work. We would like to request, since Bela has said in the past that Aumentum belongs to the commissioners, Paperclip belongs to the commissioners, OnBase belongs to the commissioners. We've tried to work with Bela. We have not been successful. We are asking the commissioners if you would please grant us permission to the information and resources we need so we can do our jobs to the best of our ability.
Commissioner Brooks?
I see a lot of things on here. This looks very reasonable, except you failed to mention there's a lot of things that you say don't really need.
Some of them, yeah.
Don't really need, don't need this. And if you put a line through those, this list shrinks considerably.
Yeah. And Kelly has some that she needs access to for PTD that weren't
I
on
think you
that
should have
list.
access.
And I don't disagree that they should have access to what they need.
But we've been waiting
Then-
for 2 months.
Then why don't you give it to them, and let's work on this through the next couple of months to develop the policies, to hone in on this stuff, but let's not become an impediment for them.
Yeah,
You know, in the end, that's how it comes across. And frankly, you know, I think that you are right in essence to want to protect data from abuse. You have no history of abuse, so therefore there's nothing imminent. So therefore, now that we've identified this, let's go ahead and let them do their job, but find a way to tighten it down to just what they need without impeding their ability to do their job.
yeah, and let's not classify it that we're not letting them do their job. They have been able to get the information they needed. They've done their job.
We did
But
for warrants of
to your
restraint.
point,
We have not been able to for PTD.
To your point-
Kelly is now in a very difficult position, and she is behind on a duty that's statutorily required because you have ghosted us since July.
Commissioners, can I just weigh in briefly?
Yes, please, thank you.
Just doesn't seem there's really much of a legal issue here. The only reason I want to chime in is that if the concern is releasing protected information, that risk is really the county's risk. It's not the individual elected official's risk. It's the commissioner's risk ultimately. So, I mean, I understand the concern to be protective of certain information that is maybe not subject to, say, like a public records request. But the treasurer's office has that same duty not to release that information. And ultimately, the risk is the county's risk.
And that was really kind of one of my concerns, is the fact that because it's all within the organization, you're not giving access to an entity that is outside of the county. You're giving access to an entity within the county. And so I would think that the duty to care for the data would remain consistent among the different elected officials.
That's right, Commissioner. And we're talking about the treasurer's office that has a genuine business need for certain information, not unfettered access to write data, but simply to view data. If we were talking about another department that had a questionable business need or no business need, then that's a different discussion. And I would suggest that that information should not be provided. But the treasurer's office clearly has a business need for this data or whatever information is there. So I'm not really seeing much of a risk in providing it because, again, they have the same duty as the assessor or any other county
Yes.
office to protect that information.
Commissioners, if I may add, I don't disagree with anything Dave said. I agree with that. And part of my motivation is, since we're developing a new system on base, my motivation has been to identify what they need so that we can proactively create reports to get them that information. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I
Because
think
we're in the stages of setting it up.
Yeah.
I'd like to set it up so that it's more user-friendly.
the problem is that you cut the access without saying, okay, continue to have the access and let's hone it down to what you need. That's the problem. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm fine if Commissioner Brooks is. We'll just make a motion that IT grant access to the Treasurer's Department for the information they need to do their job. I, as one of the commissioners on this board, am open to developing a policy that should the assessor want to develop something, to tighten it down. You can work with the treasurer's office. You don't have to work, but it would be nice if we could figure out something to tighten it down a little bit, as opposed to cutting it off and then developing an access expansion for them.
And the only thing I would add to that, there is one piece of information that I believe Jill Smith indicated that they did not need access to, which they had access to before, and I would suggest that piece of information be excluded.
Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, I'm trying to open up the email right now.
Well, we can figure that out later, but I'm going to make a motion.
I want to say it was
Unless Commissioner-
AS05 or AS08.
The AS05 is important to us because it has appraiser notes if there's possibly a danger to us when we go out, because we go out to PTDs, we go out sometimes for estates. It has warnings. There could be criminal activity there, it could be a former drug lab. There's notes in there we need to know to protect us as individuals.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you that right now, because we don't have that access, we've been very lucky that Will Pinkenfuss has worked with us. So he's doing that research for us so that we're not worried about putting ourselves in danger when we're knocking on doors. Can I tell you, it's not his favorite thing.
I understand. Commissioner Brooks, you were going to...
Yeah, two things. I would be of the mind that you go ahead and grant the access that they used to have and immediately work on some policies that protect the information that needs to be protected. The other thing, which is more of a housekeeping thing, is I don't believe any action should be taken at status update.
Well, I think that was something that was brought to your attention just because of the nature of this.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that since you've brought this up before, the board has been pretty sensitive to that. I think this is really an exception. It's certainly not a rule.
Commissioners, I'd like to add one other thing. The ASO 5 is interpretation by individuals. That information may or may not necessarily be accurate. The interpretation does not necessarily mean it's conclusively, there's information that there's information there about a conclusive danger that is imminent or real. It's perspective, and as long as it's understood in that context. And there's other information which staff, and I can't give you an example right now, my staff has pointed to that there's confidential, sensitive information that they felt should not be shared. So.
Well, who's suggesting information is being shared? I mean, this is for a business need. This is inter-agency in essence.
When I say shared, I mean by the assessors to other departments.
Well,
I'm only presenting to you what was said to me.
Yeah.
So I don't have an example to give you.
Well, then perhaps there might be a different way that you want to store that kind of data, because in essence, these systems are used by other departments to a degree. Whether something is accurate or not, if it's not accurate, I would argue there's a training issue within your department to make sure that it is accurate and that it's not just,
I wasn't saying it's not accurate.
Well, you said may or may not, so, you know.
It is interpreted.
Well, that's fine, but I think people are reasonable. I think they can draw those conclusions themselves. I mean, we're dealing with adults, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then we shouldn't have a problem.
We shouldn't have to discuss this.
Yeah.
We should not have to direct anything. We need to have if there's anything that doesn't need to be or shouldn't be disclosed, that should be a matter of common sense between the departments. But I would be very sad if we have to go down and go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, period. And you will play well together. That is not what we should be doing.
No. With that said, James, do you have enough direction if both Commissioner Brooks and myself agree that we should provide this access?
Yes, sir. That's enough direction. If we could, I mean, these minutes are enough direction, but if we could maybe get an email to just directing.
Well, I mean, I can just do a motion if you want and just.
Let's just get an email.
It's fine.
I mean, that's.
To restore the access that was taken away. One unfortunate thing, Carrie Cole's on vacation this week, so it wouldn't be done until Monday.
Mm-hmm.
But I will ask her to make that a priority Monday morning when she gets in.
Okay. Will that work for the treasurer's office?
And that we, as soon as possible, come up with some more specific direction.
Yeah, that'll be between the assessor and treasurer.
Can you at least moderate that to some degree? If you have to, bring me in. I'll take a look at it, but at least that way we can find some reasonable approach to this. The main reason being is that I just don't want us to be in a position where a request is unreasonable, meaning that it's asking for such granular,
These aren't like data fields. These are scanned images of folders. So we can either grant access or not, but we don't know what they're used for. So we would have limited knowledge of what should be shared or not. That would, again, be a treasurer and assessor thing.
Well, the treasurer is going to tell you what they need.
Right.
I mean, they shouldn't be asking for more than what they need. So we're operating off good faith here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the treasurer's office would prefer to see the original document rather than have a report created that pulls information that until we realize something was missed, we assume is there. We'd like to have the native document and not have the assessor's office create reports pulling information that they then provide us in an outside report.
It's reasonable. I mean, we're dealing with the law here, right? You're bound by certain notification requirements and things like that, so you can't make a mistake. You don't want an interpretation from somebody else, I would believe, correct? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? Well, thank you all. Next up is public comment. Anyone have any comment?
Sorry, Commissioner?
Yes.
You're gonna make a motion?
We're going to send an email to James,
In lieu of
yes,
formally doing, okay. Just-
as for direction, yeah. So, public comment? Anybody? No? 10:40, meeting adjourned. Thank you.